College basketball ended much too soon because of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, but the business of college basketball hasn't stopped. It's player transfer season, and our part of the country has had its share. On SportsBeat KC, we talk with beat writers Kellis Robinett, Taylor Eldridge, and Souichi Terada to get the latest on the departures at Kansas State, Wichita State, and Missouri. The Shockers have been especially bitten hard by the transfer bug, with 6 players leaving. It's Thursday, March 26th. I'm Blair Kirchhoff, and let's get started with Kellis Robinett on the Wildcats. Kellis, how you doing today?
I'm doing good as I can do in quarantine. How about you?
I'm doing all right. Your quarantine's a little different. You've got kids, and so you have turned into the Robinett household is now P.S. Robinett. You're homeschooling the kids. How's that going?
It's a little on the stressful side, but you know what? I got some good kids, and I got some help from my old friend, the TV, and fortunately as well, my wife has been working from home this week too. So it's been a lot easier with 2 teachers instead of just one. So we're hanging in there, but I mean everybody's dealing with it, so I'm not going to come out and complain or anything.
I think there's if there wasn't before an appreciation, probably a much greater appreciation for teachers these days.
Oh yeah, they actually had a teacher parade drive through our town yesterday, where all the teachers drove through and waved at the kids at their houses, and we were all the parents were joking we need to hijack some of these rides and make them start teaching again. We're desperate, right. Getting desperate, Blair.
All right, soldier on. We'll all have to soldier on. Hey, not unusual to see players leave programs, and it's happened at Kansas State in basketball. You had a story earlier this week that they had lost a pair of players that were intending to transfer, Nigel Shadd and James Love. We'll talk about them in a second, but the more interesting one to me was Cartier Jada's decision not to leave the program. I don't think many people expected him to be back next year, even though he has a year of eligibility. It's just the way he characterized his departure, putting himself in the transfer portal. What do you make of the decision that Cartier Jada made?
Yeah, that part of it did surprise me. The part of him, like you mentioned, not coming back to Kansas State, that wasn't a surprise. I can go back as far as I had insiders telling me all the way back in October not to expect him back next season because they thought it was that sure he was going to turn pro. So all year when we talked to Bruce Weber about like his recruiting outlook, he always mentioned that he was still going to keep looking for more guys. And, you could read between the lines and understand that nobody expected Cartier back as a senior. But it is a little bit surprising that he left the option open to transfer if things don't work out going pro. Maybe he's opening that door because of all the coronavirus stuff right now. Maybe the usual process of auditioning for the draft won't be quite as seamless as usual. Maybe he won't get to impress people. So maybe he's doubting that area a little bit. So he wants to have something to fall back on. I personally still think he'll end up turning pro and take his chances playing overseas or maybe in the G League next season. But I also, as a grad transfer, you can't rule out the possibility that he would go play somewhere else next year. I've already had some people suggest that he might look at Virginia Tech, where former Kansas State assistant Chester Frazier is now coaching. He's got a tie there. He's from South Carolina. He could maybe look to play somewhere closer back there. So, yeah, not entirely unsurprising that he's gone, but definitely surprising that he's at least entertaining the option of playing somewhere else in college next year.
How should we remember him as a K-State player? It certainly didn't end well for nobody, really, for Kansas State this season with the last place finish. But he had some pretty nice moments in his Wildcats career. How should we remember Cartier Jada?
Well, I mean, that's open to your own interpretation, and that's a question that's been kicked around here quite a bit since the season ended, really. But for me, I think I'll remember him more as just a great role player, a great energy bench guy who filled his purpose almost perfectly on 2 of the better Kansas State teams we've seen in a long time. Because if you remember, when he was a sophomore and they made it to the Elite Eight and Dean Wade got hurt, they plugged Cartier Jada in the lineup. And he was a big reason why they won a bunch of those NCAA tournament games and they had a memorable run. And then 2 seasons ago when they won the Big 12, he was, before he got hurt late in the year, he was arguably one of their best players. Could have said he was maybe the best sixth man in the league at that time. He had the windmill dunk against Kansas, which was the iconic moment, the signature moment of that season. So, there are a heck of a lot of great memories there on some of the best Kansas State teams we've seen in a while. But I think this year did muddy it a little bit. I don't know that you can just completely overlook how much of a train wreck things were with him and Bruce Weber and the whole team this year. So, I would probably lean more toward on the good, but if somebody is going to lean on the negative, I'm not going to say that that's silly either.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I remember his 2018 season, and as you mentioned, that postseason run where he was getting a lot of playing time, and that backcourt of Brown, Stokes, and Jada, they were a handful. That was a group that rolled to 3 NCAA tournament victories, and I think that team should be fondly remembered, and he's part of a Big 12 championship team as well in 20. In last season, 2019. So
yeah, and I would also point out there were times during the season where I went around and just asked some other players across the league, like who's the hardest person you've had to guard, just thinking they would say something like Udoka Azubuike or Tyrese Halliburton, and I actually surprisingly heard 2 or 3 people say Cartier Jada. He was pretty well respected across the league. There were things he did, just the way he handled the ball and attack the basket, that a lot of other players couldn't do. So he did have a lot of talent. Like you said, when they turned to that backcourt with him, Barry, and Cam, and nobody saw it coming. It's tough to beat. They beat Creighton, UMBC, and Kentucky back to back.
Yep. Okay, a couple other players who left, as we mentioned earlier, James Love and Nigel Shadd. I think the common thread here is size. They were 2 big men, right? Shadd 6'9", and Love was 6'11", but just not much playing time, and these moves were not unexpected.
No, really the only surprising thing with them was that they even came back and played this year. They were the main, transfer guys that everybody thought were going to leave last season. So I think they came back mostly just because Kansas State couldn't find anybody better last year, and then this season they played something like a combined 8 minutes. So you can totally understand where they're coming from. They've been in the program, a combined 7 or 8 years, and neither one of them has started a game. Neither one of them has really played much of any time at all other than late in blowouts. So probably best for both sides that they look to play elsewhere.
Okay. Hey, Kellis, before we break it up, let's talk about a little piece of news, a couple little pieces of news that occurred this week. One, the Catbackers tour, the state tour of coaches, athletic officials, has been canceled. That's always a big thing for Kansas State. They get out in all parts of the state. They come east, to Johnson County, Wyandotte County, this part, and then they have a big presence in Sedgwick County and in Wichita, and probably even more significant is how well they're connected in the central and western parts of the state, and just not going to happen this year.
Yeah, it's a bummer. It's another cool event that sadly had to be canceled because of all the stuff that's going around. But it really is a unique event. I know most schools try to do something during the summer where they reach out to fans, but I think Kansas State really does it better than a whole lot of schools because just across the whole state, if you're a town that has even 30,000 people in it, there's a pretty good bet that these guys are taking a bus filled with some combination of coaches and student athletes coming out willing to play golf with fans, willing to talk to them in their hometowns. And it's a pretty neat thing if you've never been to it. You're a Kansas State fan, listen to this, next summer in 2021, I definitely recommend signing up for it. It's a cool deal to go out and hear from coaches and players away from the arena. And, Kansas State is a athletic department that relies on people driving into Manhattan from all across the state to fill their stands for games. So it's kind of neat to see them return the favor and go out to all these small towns and do the exact opposite.
And we also learned this week that Kansas State and Nebraska are going to renew hostilities on the hardwood. Going to play, what was it, a 3-year series that the Huskers and Wildcats signed up for?
Yep, 3 years. Going to start in Kansas City next December. I believe the date is December 19th. It's going to be the final Saturday before Christmas. And that'll be 3 straight years that Kansas State has played at Sprint Center with a regular season game. And it'll be 4 in 2021 when they play in the CBE Hall of Fame Classic. So they got a nice little string of games going there. And then they'll play in Lincoln in 2 seasons, and then they'll play back in Bramlage in 3 seasons. So it actually, I don't know that anybody was really clamoring for Kansas State and Nebraska to play basketball again, but they're actually, they're both coming off similar seasons. Fred Hoiberg is there in Nebraska. And Bruce Weber has actually been dying to play another Big Ten team. He just every year can't seem to quite make it happen. So even though a lot of people still view Nebraska as a Big 12 team, he checks that, gets that checked off. And for the first time in a long time, we get to see Kansas State play a Big Ten team in the non-conference.
Now, if we could just get those schools together on the gridiron, I think a lot of people would love to see that too. That would be very cool. All right, Kellis, thanks for. Yes, do it. Do the same thing. One at Arrowhead, one in Lincoln, one in Manhattan. I would go for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Kellis, thanks for spending some time with us. And when we come back, you're going to hear from Kellis's compadre at the Wichita Eagle, Taylor Eldridge, talk about a school with some transfers. Taylor Eldridge from the Wichita Eagle joins us. Taylor covers the Shockers. And I got to tell you, Taylor, I'm following Wichita State season, just watching the games on television, and I remember thinking, what a great start this team is off to. They climbed up in the polls, had a great record, and they, then they hit a rough patch, but it still looked like they were going to end up in the NCAA tournament. And from my vantage point, all seemed well. Then the season ends abruptly because of the coronavirus, and we come to find out not all was well with this team. Is it 6 transfers we're up to now?
Yeah, 6 scholarship players have left the program since the end of the season. And, you're right. You don't see that, that amount of transfers is pretty rare. And then to have it come from a 23-win team, like you said, that was on the brink of an NCAA tournament, even more rare. And especially with 3 of those guys playing at least 24 minutes. So, yeah, a pretty unusual situation, to say the least.
Yeah. So a couple of them, I just noticed, I was looking at ESPN's website the other day, and they've listed a couple of the transfers, Eric Stevenson and Jamarius Burton, as 2 of the top 5 transfers available now in college basketball. So the Shockers lost, as you said, not only, guys who were getting playing time, but good players, double digit average guys, and just solid contributors. What did Greg Marshall have to say about all this?
Yeah, he had. His take was that it was kind of a perfect storm of events where, this really kind of dates back to 2 years ago when they had 6 seniors in the same class. And then Landry Shamet declares for the NBA, and then Austin Reeves is a surprise transfer. And then they had another player that was academically ineligible, and all of a sudden, you have to replace 9 of 13 scholarships. And the way that they did that was, in hindsight, I think Greg Marshall would do it a little differently because he brought in a lot of freshmen. He didn't break up the class like he said he probably should have. Like I said, in hindsight, maybe should have taken a few more JUCO transfers, maybe a graduate transfer or 2. But instead, they took a lot of freshmen, and what ended up happening was just the team was just so young, and they just didn't have very many upperclassmen. And you look at the makeup of this last season, 10 of 13 scholarship guys are freshmen or sophomore, so only 1 senior. And I think it was just a lot of different things where, players, with that many young players, a lot of them were young guards, and they're all, very talented, played the same position. And I think that just was not a good mix for, Greg Marshall has admitted, he told me after the season that he just didn't do a good job of managing the personalities, managing the players. He tried to make all of them happy, and in the end, a lot of them ended up not being happy. And I think that's what you saw at the end of this season when, 4 transfers, the very first day, and then it got up to 6 scholarship players who have left. So, yeah, I think it's a situation where it's kind of opened his eyes, and he told me himself that, he's got to learn and adapt from this. And, he took ownership of all the things that happened because, obviously these are his recruits. These are the guys that he picked to come to Wichita State. So at the end of the day, even if things didn't work out, it still falls on his feet. So, yeah, this is a learning situation. And I think from going forward, I don't think you're going to see him take, 4, 5, 6 freshmen in the same class again.
Right. Now you cover this team every day and travel with them. Did you notice some something amiss when they started losing? Was there some body language, or were players expressing any sort of disappointment? Obviously, the losing was building, but I was just wondering if you had a sense of this into February.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually put together a story that had all the quotes from looking back at this past season and all of the quotes from Marshall and some of the players after some of the losses. And it just it showed. I mean, if you were paying attention to this team and reading the quotes after these losses, some of this isn't a surprise because Greg Marshall made it very, very public that this team was going through problems, and the way that he framed it was a lot of ego problems, a lot of me first problems. After the fact, some of the players disputed that, but during the season, yeah, it was pretty obvious, especially after they had lost the second straight. You mentioned the 15-1 start; they go all the way up to number 16 in the country. They had a big week, and they ended up losing both of those games the week they were ranked the 16th. And the last loss, Marshall kind of hinted that that the egos and personalities were starting to get in the way of what could have been a really good season. And then you look at it, they lose 5 of the next 7 games. The last one being the worst loss of the Greg Marshall era, 33 points at Houston. And after that one, yeah, it was very evident that something was wrong with this team. And they had kind of a come to Jesus meeting the very next day, and they thought they got all that stuff out, but obviously that was just kind of a Band-Aid. I think what it ended up being was just a Band-Aid. They closed out the regular season winning 6 of 8. So they had, some kind of positive momentum going into the conference tournament. But, in hindsight now, it's pretty clear that was just a Band-Aid. Who knows if, a run in the American tournament, you get into the NCAA tournament, you win a game or two. Who knows? Like maybe some of those feelings get changed from the goodwill of the run, but obviously that's not going to happen. And now the new reality is 6 guys are gone,
and that all of a sudden this coaching staff finds itself casting a little bit wider recruiting net than maybe it was intending to do. So what's next for the Shockers? There are a lot of availability on this roster now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some fans have kind of gone overboard on, this is the end. They're going to be a huge rebuilding mode now. Yes, I mean it's very discouraging to lose, 6 players. Obviously, the depth is going to be hurt, but really, you look at the core of this team. You have Tyson Etienne at shooting guard, Dexter Dennis at small forward, Trey Wade back at power forward. Those 3 guys are AAC caliber players, and they have 2 upperclassmen at post. They have a redshirt freshman in Josephat Bilal, who Greg Marshall is very, very high on. He thinks he's going to be an instant impact kind of guy in the post. So really, you add a graduate transfer, and they are, very, very high right now on Alterique Gilbert, the former UConn point guard. You add someone like that, or a JUCO guy, or just an instant impact grad transfer at point guard. All of a sudden, you start to have a core that you can work with, where you can believe that an NCAA tournament is possible next year. And obviously they're gonna have to fill out the roster, and there's still challenges to adding the depth. But maybe you need to add another a center that's a grad transfer or a JUCO guy, high impact. But there is still a possibility where WSU is still, 22 plus wins, right in the conversation for the NCAA tournament next season. But it's going to take a very, very good recruiting class from Greg Marshall and his staff this spring. So and it's going to be a lot tougher now with, obviously no official visits. You can't get guys on campus, and that's going to throw, that's going to make it a lot tougher, especially when you have 6 scholarships to hand out.
Right. Well, you're right. It is a high standard that Greg Marshall has set at Wichita State. Taylor Eldridge covers the Shockers for the Wichita Eagle. Thanks for spending some time with us, Taylor.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Souichi Terada covers the Missouri Tigers for the Kansas City Star and was at the SEC tournament in Nashville along with the Tigers, who did not get to play in the tournament. Their tournament was lost, just like all the other tournaments, including the NCAA, to the coronavirus. And Missouri, in previous years, would have gotten a game in because they would have been in the bottom 4 seeds, but not this time.
Yeah, for better or for worse, they kind of backed their way. I guess they won their way into that number 10 seed in the SEC tournament on the final day of the season. And for better or for worse, maybe it might have been better because they would have squeezed the game in that Wednesday, but obviously this tournament got canceled. And a very weird vibe just with the media and the games on that Wednesday, just because nobody knew what was going to happen. And then the NBA Rudy Gobert news comes out, and all of a sudden we're shut down. So it was very up and down few hours there, and in the few hours I spent in Nashville.
And they were going to play Texas A&M, as I recall.
Yes, Texas A&M on that 6 p.m. on that Thursday. Still have it down.
A team that they had been swept by during the regular season, but I thought there was a pretty good vibe about Mizzou going into that game.
Yeah, and the analytics favored Mizzou just because Texas A&M had a poor non-conference. But yeah, they got swept, but I think that with Jeremiah Tillman and Mark Smith coming back, they look like a team that was kind of trying to find their groove a little bit, and who knows, maybe a run in the SEC tournament was a possibility. They were looking that way and maybe had a favorable draw to do so, but we'll never know. We'll never know what will have happened. Whether MU, KU, around the nation, whatever it is.
No, just have to look on some projections that I've seen online, what might have happened in some of these games. So, but as Missouri, as every other college program in the country is doing, they got an early look ahead to next season. And there's a lot to like about what's coming up for the Tigers, assuming everyone stays. But that's not everyone has stayed. The Tigers did lose a transfer. Trey Jackson is in the transfer. Why do I can't say it right? Transfer portal. And I'm always a little disappointed when a highly regarded freshman comes in, doesn't perform up to expectations, and decides to leave. I mean, I think that's probably a pretty common story. Guy comes in with a lot of hype. He was a 4-star recruit and didn't play much. I think he appeared in 26 games, averaged a couple of points a game, and it's just not going to. He didn't feel like it was going to work for him in Columbia. What can you tell us about the Trey Jackson transfer?
Yeah, Trey Jackson, right, the Detroit native, right where I'm from. We had this conversation where we found out we grew up near each other, even though he's a little younger than me. So, fun fact there. And I think I was both surprised and not surprised with Trey, just because I was surprised when Conzo kind of went out of his way a few times to praise Trey and kind of the process, right, for young players and what it looks like going forward and how they project and not necessarily have that immediate gratification in your freshman year. And then at the same time, I was not surprised, though, because you look at who Mizzou brings back as a team, pretty much the entire roster besides maybe a Reed Nico, NCAA rules pending. But the way the roster shaped up, I mean, there just really wasn't that much playing time to go around. So I think that absolutely contributed to why he left. And I think, as you mentioned, it is a little disappointing for Mizzou fans just because he was supposed to be this highly touted recruit, this 4-star prospect from, Michigan. And he was part of the long-term plan, I mean, yeah, you bring back a lot of people next year, but the year after that, you graduate a few players, a few marquee players, and maybe he would have found a role there. So I just think that he showed a lot of good things, but there were too many holes in his game as a freshman, which happens as an 18, 19-year-old, kid playing against some older men. But yeah, overall, the outlook doesn't look too great if you're Mizzou, just losing a guy like that, a 4-star guy who fans were rightfully excited about.
Yeah, it turned out that Kobe Brown was the freshman that emerged and made progress, and that did surprise me a little bit. So, what was it about? What did you see covering this team this year? Where didn't it happen for Trey Jackson?
Yeah, and so the thing about Trey, I feel like, is you absolutely saw the athleticism he brought, and really, when you talk about this Mizzou basketball team, that really wasn't there besides maybe him, Xavier Pinson, and Jeremiah Tillman, and maybe a few other guys. But and that's the thing with Trey, is just that he had all the tools to look good and look successful and look like a contributor. But I think there were just a few too many times where defensive lapses or a silly mistake. Though really the sticking point for me was the first Mississippi State game where Mizzou played against, and Trey played 1 minute. He had 2 bad fouls, and he sat the rest of the game. And I keep pointing back to that moment where I just thought, man, I mean, it looked like he might have started to break out a little bit, started to find a spot in the rotation, and he just wasn't able to do that, and just didn't look comfortable at times on the floor. So I think the bad you had to take with the good, but there were too many times where, especially with the Conza Martin team, right, the defense just wasn't there consistently enough, and then the offense was a little too sloppy for Mizzou to really roll with him and kind of rely on him, even though it was a lost season.
Yeah, what you just described is a vote of no confidence in that Mississippi State game. So, look, I think he's a Division I player. He'll land at a Division I program. I don't know if it'll be in at a Power 5. It may be. It could be. I mean, he certainly had others, but big college suitors when he was recruited. So we'll see where Trey Jackson ends up. And I was wrong. I mean, he isn't the only freshman to transfer. Mario McKinney also left the program in January, but he's taking a different route. He's already enrolled, I think, in a junior college. Is that right?
Yes, JUCO in Illinois. So I believe I read, or I believe the plan for him is to go that route and eventually transfer out after a couple years or a year, just for him to get that college ball experience, just because there really was no spot for him in the rotation at Mizzou. I mean, I don't think I believe the media never got him. There was a few media availability before I took this job. So, and talking to others, like we never spoke to Mario McKinney Jr., so we weren't really sure what he was about and maybe what, necessarily didn't work for him at Mizzou.
Right. Okay. Well, how about just give it a quick synopsis on what this team's going to look like next season. I know it's early. A lot of decisions could be made. Heck, we don't even know when college sports is going to resume in our coronavirus world. But what's the early outlook on Mizzou next season?
Yeah, so Conza Martin obviously now has 2 guaranteed scholarship spots without Trey and Mario there. And then you're looking at a Reed Nico who is graduating, has run out of eligibility, but we'll see, just because the NCAA might grant eligibility relief. I doubt it for the winter sports like basketball. It's going to happen for the spring sports, I think, like baseball and softball, but it's a harder sell for basketball. So I think those 3 guys from the start of last season you're losing, but then pretty much everyone has the opportunity to come back. I think Jeremiah Tillman is likely going to go through the NBA process, whatever that might be. I think that's another thing you have to kind of consider. Like, I don't think the NBA knows what to do for evaluation. And if there
Right.
not an evaluation period, is Jeremiah coming back? Or is Jeremiah even going to go through the process? So you kind of have to consider that. I can see maybe an Xavier Pinson with a strong finish he had going through the process, but I think he ultimately comes back. So realistically, you bring back everybody who matters, or at least could. Jeremiah Tillman, Xavier Pinson, Drew Smith, Mark Smith, Javon Pickett. Though all those guys are going to be key cornerstones for next year, and I think. And the thing is, Blair, I keep mentioning this in my stories. It's just that you could see that, yes, Mizzou had a lot of returning players, a lot of sophomores and juniors, but they weren't really experienced like a veteran team. And I think you really need that in college basketball, where your best year is your senior year, like Reed Nico had. And so all these games where you saw Mizzou play very well against, the LSUs of the world, play very well, but then falter down the stretch, which happens so many times this year, especially on the road. To me, that's the signs of a young team. And then if you add another year and then you have guys who are seniors, I think you're starting to look a little bit more optimistic, especially with that border war game coming up in December. So I think all of these there are these little things that point up, and I think next year is really the year where Mizzou has to do well just because of who they bring back, what talent they bring back, and it is Consul Martin's 4th year, and I think it's kind of make it or break it a little bit in terms of just the long-term outlook for this program.
Yeah, if they can win one game next season, one game, it'll be that one. I can't wait for KUMU at Sprint Center. Okay, Souichi, thanks for spending some time with us. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yep, talk to you again soon.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to the production team of Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett, and a tip of the cap to Kellis Robinett, Taylor Eldridge, and Souichi Terada. Remember, coverage of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic on kansascity.com is not behind a paywall. It's that important for you to have easy access to the most comprehensive coverage of this health crisis. Thanks for listening to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Stars sports podcast.